Not a day goes by where the idiots in politics and the culture war and in the media provide us with a litany of ludicrous levity. In the seemingly never-ending tragicomedy, it has become increasingly difficult to identify the good guys from the bad guys. The once cohesive teams of the left and the right have splintered into tribal factions and no longer seem to represent anybody but themselves and their own interests. So today we'll begin a weekly segment in which we take a look back at the previous 168 hours and determine whether or not anything that is of great value has even taken place for the American people and the people of the world, or if it's all just socio-political bullshit after all.
This is not mind control. Think about it.
This past week has been fantastic for political poltroonery, starting with Virginia Governor Ralph Northam. Last week, he made some startling statements regarding his state's pending late-term abortion legislation. The law basically says that abortions will be allowed up until the point of birth, and Northam defended the legislation and then suggested that women should be able to determine whether their born-alive infant should receive life-saving care.
So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother. So I think this was really blown out of proportion.
Notice that he's actually referring to the child as an infant and not as a fetus. It doesn't matter what political persuasion you are, and it doesn't matter how you feel about abortion in general. This is pretty disturbing. So it's been the response of his party to initially kind of ignore it because it's really tough to feel that this is somehow okay. And as if that wasn't enough, a photograph from the 1984 medical school yearbook page of Mr. Northam appeared in the media showing a person dressed as a member of the Ku Klux Klan and another in blackface. In addressing the issue on Friday, he admitted to posing for the photo and then immediately apologized for it. Strangely, he wouldn't say whether he was the man in blackface or the one wearing the Klan hood, but then he flip-flopped. He actually said he wasn't in the photo after all. But then he revealed that on another occasion, he had been in blackface with shoe polish for a Michael Jackson costume in a dance contest in 1984. Northam was asked why he was referred to as Coon Man on his yearbook page at the Virginia Military Institute, and he replied by saying that two cadets a year or so older than him had given him the nickname, but insisted he had no idea what their motives or intent were. Of course, Northam has been asked to step down as governor, and of course, he has refused. What I find particularly fascinating is that there was very little outrage over Northam's description of infanticide, of killing children that were born alive, in comparison to that of a 35-year-old photo of what could be Northam in either blackface or Klan robes. Watching the left eat itself is always amusing, but in this case, there are just too many incidents to pass up. CNN, the network that promotes the hashtag Facts First, made it downright hilarious when they mislabeled Ralph Northam as a Republican on Friday during a segment on Anderson Cooper 360. But knowing what we know about the press these days, this isn't surprising. And I'm not saying they did this on purpose. I have no evidence of that. There's plenty of dishonest journalism and partisanship to go around there. Both ABC and NBC tried to downplay the initial news report of the photo because it surfaced on a far-right or conservative outlet. Well, that just invalidates it immediately, doesn't it? I mean, who even needs to bother checking sources in a case like that? The Washington Post endorsed Northam for governor, slamming his opponent for pandering to vile and racially inflammatory tendencies in his party's base. But the rag was able to send reporters to Alabama to dig into Republican Roy Moore's Senate race. It's also no secret that Northam had refused to shake the hand of his black American opponent, E.W. Jackson, in a 2013 debate. The press ignored that completely. Former Secret Service agent turned commentator Dan Bongino tweeted that he had seen this photo back in October of 2018, but couldn't verify it as Northam, so he didn't publish his discovery. However, he suggests that since he had seen it, many others likely had, and posits that it was squashed for political reasons. Washington Post blogger Jennifer Rubin was slammed when she referred to Northam's potential replacement Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax as a dynamic, eloquent African American. Well-known idiot Alyssa Milano called Rubin's description, quote, what systemic deep-rooted racism looks like. For describing the character of his replacement, it didn't seem to bother anyone when another powerful idiot, Harry Reid, remarked on, quote, light-skinned President Obama's, quote, lack of Negro dialect. Or even when Democratic Party favorite for president in 2020, the king of gaffes himself, creepy Uncle Joe Biden said about then-Senator Obama, quote, the first mainstream African-American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy. And then there was the incident last night on Real Time with Bill Maher. Right in the middle of the KKK blackface controversy with the idiot governor of Virginia elevating racial tensions in the country and all over social media, Maher decided to make a racist comment to a black American Republican congressman.
I will say this.
You were in the CIA?
I was in the CIA for almost a decade. I was the dude in the back alleys at 4 o'clock in the morning collecting intelligence on threats to the homeland. I did
That's
2
where
years
they collect
in
them, huh?
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
I did 2
By the
years.
Popeyes chicken.
But I did
Now, I'm sure that the media and leftist outrage has reached a fever pitch, and protests to fire Maher and cancel his show, burning his career to the ground, have overwhelmed HBO's offices, right? Of course not. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of my favorite political poltroons that I like to refer to as the Trump of the left, got into a Twitter battle with a Washington Post fact checker because, well, she doesn't like her blather being checked for accuracy. The socialist nitwit Ocasio-Cortez has declared war on fact checkers and media outlets who, she says, quote, spend too much time analyzing the factuality of her claims rather than the morality of her sentiments. Washington Post fact-checker Glenn Kessler began fact-checking her numerous idiotic claims prior to their Twitter snitfest. In a fact-check article in which he took apart Ocasio-Cortez's interview with the Atlantic Monthly, Kessler began by informing us that he had a tense conversation with a spokesman for the Congresswoman, which was followed by the, quote, media-savvy Ocasio-Cortez attempting to preempt his fact check with a tweet. I don't think billionaires should concentrate on wealth while employing people or sleeping in cars, working a zillion hours to survive. Next day, that will be 10 Pinocchios to Ocasio. A zillion is not a real number, and I found someone who sleeps in a tent, not in a car. Kind of reminds me of the same kind of fact-checking they do with Trump. Kessler's fact-checking began with her claim that a vast majority of the country does not have a living wage. He says it is based on a faulty premise because the living wage is not really a measure of income, but of living costs before taxes, such as food, childcare, housing, transportation, and other basic necessities, and not a number that applies across the board regardless of circumstance or geography. He went on to say that the Congresswoman's office sent him an article claiming that about 43% of all households don't earn enough to afford a monthly budget that includes housing, food, childcare, healthcare, transportation, and a cell phone. Well, the last time I checked, 43% is not a majority, nor is it a vast majority. Kessler then refuted her claim that Walmart and Amazon pay their employees less than minimum wage by saying both Walmart and Amazon do pay more than the minimum wage. Conclusion, the Post awards 3 Pinocchios for her claims that contain significant factual error and or obvious contradictions. Ocasio-Cortez then went to Twitter and, like Trump does, launched into an ongoing feud with Kessler in which he falsely claimed that Kessler cited a report by a Walmart-funded think tank for his source. Well, the report cited was actually authored by the former chairman of Obama's Council of Economic Advisors, Jason Furman. Ocasio-Cortez suggested then that Furman likely left public service to collect a lobbyist paycheck. Furman actually showed up on the Twitter battlefield to clarify to Ocasio-Cortez that the report was not funded by anyone, but was in fact produced for a conference hosted by the left-leaning Center for American Progress. Her Walmart-funded claim debunked, Ocasio-Cortez offered an apology to Furman, but then went on to claim victory over the Washington Post despite failing to accurately fact-check his fact-check. For this and a number of other impossibly stupid posts, Cortez wins our coveted Twitter Twit of the Week award. And while it is her first, I have a suspicion it certainly won't be her last. And finally, 21st century socialist paradise Venezuela has entered into the final stages of its collapse as posturing by the interim president and ousted president duke it out to see which gets to preside over the most recent example of the disaster of socialism. Just 7 years ago, in an essay lambasting the income inequality of the American economy, Bernie Sanders hailed socialist Venezuela as a better example of the American dream than the United States. Senator Sanders wrote, "These days, the American dream is more apt to be realized in South America, in places such as Ecuador, Venezuela, and Argentina, where the incomes are actually more equal today than they are here in the land of Horatio Alger." Well, Bernie, old boy, Venezuela is suffering from an unprecedented economic collapse, owing precisely to the redistributionist programs that you have so enthusiastically declared should be a model for the U.S. There's no food, hospitals have no medicine, no electricity, there's no supplies, and rationing is becoming a fact of life. And what are the other countries that Sanders says are fairer and more equitable than the horrific conditions in the evil capitalist U.S.? According to Bloomberg, in 2017, Ecuador's President Correa left a country mired deep in recession and facing a currency crisis. Just as Venezuela, Ecuador has been ruled by a socialist government that was able to subsidize its social engineering projects through oil revenues. The end of the oil boom had left the government without the funds to pay for those programs. Correa had sought political asylum in Belgium and has been called back to Ecuador to face charges related to kidnapping an opponent in 2012. Argentina, the last of the Sanders economic role models, is a country with immense natural industrial wealth that has seen its economy pirated by a kleptocratic government. Under President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, the government's official statistics agency, INDEC, released a steady stream of falsified numbers to disguise the country's slide into economic catastrophe. In 2015, when de Kirchner left office, INDEC corrected those statistics, revealing the country's economic reality. Commiserations Argentines, a 2017 essay in the Financial Times, spoke to the people of Argentina saying, "You are now poorer than the Chinese, Bulgarians, Azerbaijanis, Turkmen, Mexicans, Malaysians, and Gabonese, not to mention your beloved neighbors in Brazil. All is not lost, though. You are still a smidgen better off than those in Botswana and in war-torn Libya." Projections for 2019 are also quite dismal, as Argentina has asked the IMF for a bailout in an attempt to control their failing economy and 20% inflation rate. Yeah, Bernie, you called it, bro. So I have to call out the righties on social media that are making false equivocations and bullshit statements. It makes me nuts. It's being spread on social media that Northam was actually a member of the Klan. Well, do you know that for sure? Do you have sources and evidence? Because nobody else does. No? Then shut up! Then there is this piece of crap going around. It is patently false. She has said plenty of other disturbing, bigoted, and stupid things, but this is not one of them. The shit she has said is enough to make a case for her bigotry, but adding lies to it only hurts your case. So please stop saying shit that isn't true. It doesn't help your case any more than it helps the lefties when they do it. Stop! You should feel stupid for doing the same stupid shit that you call out the left for doing. Stop it! Thanks for stopping by the tank. Next week we'll be having another look at the stupid that is an inevitable fact of life for all of us, especially those of us who are smart enough to recognize the stupid when we see it. As always, if I got something wrong, missed something, left something out, please let me know. I'm always happy to correct bad information with better information. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. We are trying to build a channel here, and we need your help to do it. Leave us a comment or add to the conversation at Skeptic Tank Show on Twitter, at Skeptic Tank Show on Facebook, and as always, I'm looking forward to hearing what it is you think.
Asshole! You're an asshole! And you know it!